You brought something up that I want to ask you about, your opinion. It is controversial.
Ooh, let's go for it.
Most wedding professionals don't list their pricing on their website for a multitude of reasons.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
That being said, when couples are coming to the website to figure out, can I even afford you?
Yeah.
Right? And they don't want to waste their time filling out an RFP or a website or all of that.
Yeah.
Like, what is your stance on like just putting your like minimum package on the website?
So ours are on the website because I'm like a very upfront person. Like I don't lie to my clients. If you come to me in a consult call and you're like, my budget's 20 grand and I want to do a 200 person wedding, I'm like, honey, not possible. So like I don't BS, and our starting prices are on our website for that reason. I'm not trying to waste your time or mine. I think that everyone should do that. I also think sometimes it becomes a game with other vendors where they're like price shopping you and trying to undercut people, which is, I think, what most people are afraid of. But like, okay, undercut me. Talk to me after the wedding day, guys.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not super threatened by that, but like I've seen that. I mean, there's florists out there that are like minimum spend $40,000 nowhere on the website. Like I'm sure they're getting a million contact forms filled out all the time for people that don't have $45,000 to spend on florals. Like, why not? Just say it.
Yeah, I think it's so important because it creates that transparency. And I hear you on, you know, the fear of someone seeing your pricing, undercutting you. But regardless, every package is customized, right? And, you know, that $40,000 minimum might be for an actual like full-blown wedding with 100 guests. But if you're having a micro wedding or a dinner party, right? Like I'm sure at least that gives you an understanding of like, they're $40,000 for a full-blown wedding. Like, okay, that makes sense. I'm having like a little rehearsal dinner, right? Maybe they'll be with my budget.
I mean, I like always encourage people to still reach out. Like if you think that like, hey, we really want to work with you, but like we're worried, reach out. We'll see what we can do. Sometimes I'll build like a special package for people. If I'm like very clear about what we're going to do. Like one time I did, you know, okay, we're going to help you with design and then we're going to do game day. It's very, very like, you know, we have to really have a chat and see if this is possible. Some people I wouldn't offer that for. But yeah, like I'm a reasonable human being. And I think most people in this industry are. But what I get really frustrated at is people that are like, I hear this from photographers a lot. They're like, sometimes they have their pricing on the website and it's explicit, like 10 hours of photography for like 10 grand, whatever. And they'll be like, Alyssa, I got an inquiry the other day and they said their budget was $2,000 and they were wondering if I could just lower my price for 10 hours of photography to $2,000. And that's just so rude. Like, and so sometimes you can't, like, don't be that person. You know, if you see it and it's $10,000 and your budget's $2,000, don't try to haggle. Just move on. But
find
like
someone in your budget.
Yeah. If you're trying to get someone for 10 hours of photography for $2,000, you're going to have to do your own research for that one because that's going to be a small scale.
And that's going to be someone who's probably very early in their career and is looking to learn and experiment, which look, that might be for you.
Yeah.
If you're down for an experimental situation on your wedding photography,
100%.
You're rolling the dice.
I'm not going to knock anything because we all started somewhere. Obviously, I'm like super grateful to the people that gave me a shot early on in my career. However, there's a reason why a lot of companies don't make it past a few years. I mean, you got to be that type of person that's like just good at your craft. And unfortunately, some people are not. So like I've heard horror stories. I mean, not from my clients, but like I read this story on the internet once that was like, we had our friend do the photos and then we refused to feed him. So he deleted all our photos on the spot. I'm like, warranted because he was working for free.
Yeah.
You weren't going to feed
your friend.
You have to feed vendors, guys, by the way. It's like in our contracts.
Speaking of contracts, what do you think are some things that couples overlook in vendor contracts?
I mean, the New York City couples don't overlook anything. They take a magnifying glass to that thing. I do sometimes think that they do not pay attention to timetables. So like the stationery one is a really good example. I mean, they're usually pretty explicit about that because they know, you know, that they're not in control. They're sending it to like outside parties for printing sometimes. So like timelines, I always make sure everybody really understands their payment schedules. Like you will have to write a very large check at this time. So be prepared. move your money around accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've had a dad message me before and been like, when should I liquidate? I'm like, hurry up, honey. I love him, by the way. I wish he could adopt me. He's like my favorite. I actually like really enjoy working with the parents. I think they're so fun.
The parents of the weddings. But have you ever come across a situation where the parents who are paying for the wedding have a little bit of a different vision than the actual couples getting married?
You know what? I really haven't had that person in my mix. Yeah. One time I had a mom and daughter come at me for wedding planning, and the way that they all handled the contract for me, I actually walked away from it.
You were like, not for me.
I was like, this is not going to be conducive to me or any other vendor. Like,
you just got the vibe, what, that they didn't get along?
It was the most insane contract situation I've ever had in my life. Like they basically, and I don't advise this, guys, like when you sign on to iTunes, right, you don't fight the terms with Apple.
Yeah.
There's sometimes you could ask a question like, can we talk through this or this? But they were like trying to get me to remove entire clauses from my contract. They were like, oh, and we're going to do this for payment. And I'm like, who do you think? The contract protects our businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So just the way they handled that. And I was just like.
So they were basically trying to redline your entire agreement.
Literally get me to redo my entire contract to better suit them. And I was like, this is a no from me.
So red flag if they were they lawyers?
No, he worked in finance. I actually Googled him after that because I was like, I need to know if he's a lawyer. And he wasn't. And the first time they asked, I was actually super nice. And I was just like, hey, let's have a chat and maybe I can explain things to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a harassment clause in our contract because sometimes drunk guests are really, I've had people like touch me. And wow. I'm like, oh my God, this is never happening. So I protect my employees. It just says if we're like excessively harassed in a really ridiculous way that we have the opportunity to kind of like walk, which has never happened. Mm-hmm. But I have to protect my employees. Mm-hmm. They're young women. And he was like, we need to remove that entirely. I was like,
What, was he worried that his buddies were going to like harass your staff? And
I don't know. But even when I explained why it's important to have it, even though it doesn't apply to 99% of people, because there's that 1% we're never aware of. And I have to protect the young women that work in my company. And he was like, we're getting rid of that. And I was like, this is where the conversation's going to end.
Well, drunk guests are a problem.
Yeah, I've had security escort people out before. Yeah, so like we're not adult babysitters. Like we're not going to like sit here and like feed that person coffee till they sober up. We have a huge job to do. Mm-hmm. So,
if someone's an event liability, they're getting the boot.
Yeah, I mean the venue's always kicking them out. They're not trying to put up with that. Mm-hmm. So, I just had to put it in there. And he was like, that was one of 100 things he wanted gone. But it was just like, and the mom was also like backing it up. And I was just like, it's the only time when I've had to walk away from a couple because I was just like, this is going to be horrible.
Yeah. Well, the contracts are there, like you said, to protect you and also the other people at the event.
Yes. And all the vendors have their own contracts. So like, are you going to do this for everyone? Like, I'm never going to have, it's going to be so hard to get a vendor for you guys. I
do want to ask you a question about wedding photographer contracts, because this is something that my best friend was getting married. She asked me for a number of photographer recommendations. And, I went to the Loverly list. I gave her a bunch of our Loverly faves. And she was surprised, but also I was surprised when she did ask for a contract modification. So this is a controversial subject for wedding photographers and planners and all vendors. They use the weddings that they do as part of their marketing, right? But if a couple, for whatever reason, does not want their wedding photos out there, and they ask for that clause to be stricken from the contract.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Should it be removed? Should it not be removed?
Yeah, I've had this conversation so many times with clients over the years. So in the state of New York, the photographer owns the rights to the photos. So like, it is what it is with that. So some photographer, it depends who the photographer is. Sometimes they're like, look, this is my livelihood. So it's a no. but most of them are reasonable. Like usually I'm as the planner, I'm here to talk people down from the ledge. So I don't usually set people loose on the photographer, and I'll usually tell them, hey guys, I only work with respectful vendors, and we're never posting photos of family. You'll never see a photo of people's family on my page ever. I am not posting those intimate moments with like grandma. It's just not my vibe. But we do need to showcase our work. That's how you hired us. That's how everyone else hired us. They're very visual.
But if they would pay additionally to have that removed?
No, that's what I was going to say. So sometimes it's a situation where when I tell them like, oh, we're just going to do tabletop or whatever, I'll put it in your contract. Like we're going to use the photos, but just know among us, and I've said this, like it's a handshake agreement. I will not post a photo of you guys. And they've been like, thank you, but I'm going to post the room, honey. With the photographer, they sometimes do the same agreement and I can talk them into that. And then other times the photographer's like, you have to pay more to own the rights, and then I'll sign it over and we'll amend the agreement that way. So if you're willing to pay for the rights, sometimes people are really amenable with that. But it's like, I think that's a little crazy.
I think photographers will come for me on this, but if someone's hiring you and for whatever reason, security reasons, or you don't want people seeing your wedding photos.
Oh, security reasons, I get that. And we've had—
But you don't know what security is. It could be a crazy ex-girlfriend. It could be, you have a high profile job, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And this has happened many times at Loverly where photographers submit weddings.
Oh God.
Because they own the rights to them.
Yeah.
We feature them. It goes out in an email to 100,000 people.
Yeah.
And then we get an email from a bride who says, I'm going to have a lawyer send you a letter.
Oh my God.
Because
wait, they didn't— I have never—
so the photographer didn't tell—
Are you serious?
The bride that it was being featured.
That's crazy.
It got featured and then we loved it so much we sent it to our email list.
Okay, that's a photographer that I wouldn't work with, because whenever we've published a wedding, I have, first of all, told the photographer, if they're the one getting it published, you have to get everyone's permission, all the vendors too, by the way. And if I'm the one publishing it, because sometimes the photographers let the planner, I ask permission. So 90%
of the bride,
yeah,
or the groom, or the couple,
the whole couple. We have group chains, and all of our clients are usually like, the ones that I'm wanting to get published, we've been talking about it the whole wedding.
So who's at fault there? The photographer who owns the rights didn't tell.
Yeah, they should.
But the contract says, I own the rights. I can do whatever I want with it.
But it's courtesy though. It's our intimate day. Even though you own the rights, there is a respect level. So this is my problem.
This is the problem with the contract.
This is the problem with vendors. Yes, we're in a business and we have contracts, but this is an emotional business. Use your brain, have emotional intelligence. If you're putting somebody's wedding in Vogue and you know that they've expressed they're a private person, why wouldn't you tell them before you submit it? Like emotional intelligence, honey, please. There's not a lot of that sometimes in this industry, which is so funny because we're dealing with emotional days. So that is very weird.
Yeah, I mean, but it goes back to kind of the earlier point. A couple wants a contract to be modified to protect that situation. Yeah. But then there's that unsaid rule of, hey, we'll let you know if we submit the wedding, or we'll get the other vendors to, give their explicit permission. But if that was the case, I feel like no weddings would get published because every wedding has like 20 vendors. You got to get 20 opt-ins before you submit a wedding.
I mean, all of us are usually on the same. It's so weird. So like, this is why I feel like it's like when people are telling me like, oh, I price shopped my planner. We went with someone cheaper. I'm like, whatever you want to do. But there is a thing that comes with having a planner who knows what the hell they're doing. And this is one of those things, like, I mean, when I was doing the weird colors that you're like afraid of, I told the bride, I was like, we're getting this one published. She was like, honey, I cannot wait. Like when that is the vibe, you know it. You always know your couples. So that photographer is rogue and I don't support that. I've had couples be like, not a photo. I'm like, cool. I'm going to post your tables, just a heads up. And they don't say anything to that. But yeah, I do think that it's personality based. I feel like 90% of people don't care. And then 10% do.
And that 10% really cares.
They really care. If the photographer in the state is saying you own the rights, it's like, what can they do? Like they want to make a few extra bucks for the headache of having to like censor their own work. So like I do kind of agree with the extra fee. And like I've had people ask me to sign an NDA and ask the photographer, it's acceptable, but we have to understand why. Like I've had very high profile people at my weddings. Like I had a Supreme Court justice do a reading. So like they were like, no photos of her. I'm like, got it. Respect it.
Mhm.
I mean, I had to take a video for my personal because like, when am I going to see a Supreme Court justice intimately like this in my whole life? It was very cool.